Welcome, everyone, to Untold, the best kept secrets in Utah. Untold exists for one reason: to surface what doesn't make it into the press releases. The decisions that look clean from the outside but cost something real on the inside. My guest today is Matthew Wride. He helped build DecisionWise into a serious player in employee engagement and people analytics. He led it as CEO and last year navigated a private equity acquisition that changed the structure around him. He stayed on leading the new entity, TMA Performance, as the managing director. What I want to explore today are the costs of growth and what the shift is like to lead growth when you're no longer the one setting the growth agenda. Not the financial case per se, but rather the hidden costs in clarity, focus, and the ability to lead the way you know how to lead. Matthew, thanks for being here.
I'm excited to be here today, and it's been a journey, and so you framed that nicely.
Awesome. So I would love to start a little bit with DecisionWise and understanding that company and the culture. DecisionWise was around for about 30 years before building something really specific: relationships, methodology, and a culture. How would you have described what made DecisionWise stand out going into the acquisition?
Yeah, so DecisionWise was originally founded by a man named Juan Raboldi, and then he brought on kind of who I consider to be our first founder, which was Tracy Malett. Tracy is very much an academic. He is a thought leader, and he ran the show for a long time, and I was sort of president and then eventually CEO. But my job was to sort of try to help us manage a digital transformation, because we were a consultancy that kept building software, and eventually we're like, we should just sell software. And that was sort of my role, was to handle that digital transformation. So what I liked about who we were, though, is that we really took the science serious. We weren't just a couple of developers thinking we had a good idea and testing out what would work. We really had a lot of experience behind us before we sat down to spec out, features. And I think that's what made it people, when they finally get into our software, like, oh, that's really thoughtful. And that's because we had been kind of navigating the challenges for so many years.
Interesting. Yeah. What you're describing is kind of a deep and thoughtful approach, right? Deep research and
Mhm.
academic background,
Yeah.
intentional product development cycles.
I think yeah.
Private equity has a totally different time horizon. So what's
Right.
that shift been like?
Well, it's a challenge. I think you tell yourself you're theoretically informed, and you theoretically understand what the buy and build process is that most private equity acquisitions are centered around. But it does kind of take you off guard when you actually are part of it, our parent company has bought three other companies. Well, actually, and a couple of other tiny small add-ons in addition to that. And so just growing through the buy and build strategy has been different. And you can't be as thoughtful as you want to be. Like, every once in a while, I find myself going, oh, we got to stop and integrate and make sure everything works together. And that's just not the time frame you've been given. So you have to be okay in figuring out, okay, what does the customer have? What do they need? And how do I stitch it together so it is integrated and it feels like a reasonably good experience to the customer, even though on the back end it's not as perfect as you'd like it to be.
Okay. So some hard trade-offs
Mhm.
involved there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when the merger's announced, there's a strategic rationale. There's probably some expectations that you had of
Uh-huh.
how it was going to go. Um, what's held up? What things kind of, in terms of your expectations, have come true, and which ones maybe look different now?
So the private equity partner that sort of funded both the company that bought us, which is TMA, the original TMA out of the Netherlands, and then us and the other add-ons, they are Dutch. And I have really appreciated that they move thoughtfully and maybe a little bit more. They have a there's a philosophy I've heard a few times. We have to slow down to go fast.
Hmm.
They believe that legitimately. And so we were careful in who we chose as our private equity partner, and I have a lot of good things to say about them. I mean, yes, we are in a space where the rules of private equity apply, but the people who run those, who are running the day to day, they try to do it a little differently, and I've been appreciative of that. So that's been something. But we were thoughtful. We selected who we wanted to go with, and somewhat based on that um, that the fact that they were an EU-based private equity firm and not just a Silicon Valley firm.
Okay. So kind of differentiated the even within PE, you chose a partner that fit maybe more your culture a little closer.
Yeah, and not to say that they accept bad work or anything. They don't, and we've had difficult conversations. But their strategy and the founder Charlie of our fund, he is thoughtful and he is realistic, and I like that a lot.
Hmm. So what did the acquisition unlock for you that you couldn't have done without it?
Mhm. So I'm going to get a little geeky in that I'm going to talk about OD, organizational development, a little in this to answer this, but
Okay.
there's a lot of people in our space which measure the environment, which measure what is it like to work somewhere. And we run surveys and we have all these check-ins and ways to gather feedback, essentially capturing the voice of the employee. And we do that, others do that. And that was great, but it didn't unlock everything you need in order to drive true employee engagement. When I use the term employee engagement, I'm talking about someone bringing extra effort, really taking ownership in their job, kind of it's an emotional state where they're invested. To get there, you have that 50% is the environment, but the other 50% are their own drives and passions. And we had no way of measuring that. So when we were put together with TMA talents out of the Netherlands, they gave us that ability. And so together we have what we call our 50-50 equation, which is we're going to help you understand the environment, and we're going to work on it. And then we're also going to understand what truly drives and motivates people. And they have, in 99, they developed a world-class psychometric assessment that it's one of the top in the European Union. We're bringing it here, and we're combining it together with a suite of listening tools. And that was our value proposition. And that's why we decided to do it was we liked having something other than, hey, we're just a better version of X
Okay.
survey company.
So
We
you were
actually try to solve a problem.
okay. Initially you were kind of measuring more the environmental signal and not getting the intrinsic signals, and now you're
Correct.
getting both the
And
intrinsic
now we're getting both. And now we feel
and
like, okay, we can really answer your question. Customer, we can drive true value because we
okay.
can tell you which side of the equation, where are you at? And and which levers should you pull on either one? Both are important, but you've got to understand which one. And you're only 50% there if you're only running a survey every year.
Okay. So I'm curious. So what's the employee engagement story look like in your company then, as you've navigated through this merger? Right, where are the weak points or the highlights or the lowlights?
I think you've probably been taught about medical student disease, which is medical students start their first and second year, and pretty soon they start diagnosing themselves with every malady possible. It's rough to try to be the leader of of a company that purports to, champion employee experience and employee engagement. We don't get it right by any stretch, and they are very skilled in telling you that. So my employees are very good at pointing out where we're not maybe living up to the principles that we are trying to help other companies
Hmm.
follow. And so, and going through the merger has just uncovered more areas where they're able to do that. But you know what? They're right to do it. I'm proud that we have an environment where they can come into my office and tell me that we're not doing things because I hope everyone in our company wants to do the right thing. They don't want to be right. They want to do what's right. And that's a value and a mission that we really live by. And so, but yeah, to answer your question, the merger always uncovers your warts, and therefore you get reminded of it, and that's okay. So,
Yeah, well, and change, right? I mean, anytime you've got change, you're gonna see it show up,
mm,
right?
yep,
In
for
the
sure.
in people's feedback and their
Right.
attitudes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm. You know, I'm curious. So when you were describing DecisionWise and
Mhm.
very scientific sort of company,
Right.
really structured decision process. Um, it's been my experience when you're operating at pace or under the grow at all costs, like sometimes PE companies can be, that that can lead to, hey, if 'cause should we do option A or option B? And the answer is yes. Any growth is good growth. And when strategic choices get framed in this new way, maybe it's a little bit different for you, but the pressure is up. How do you actually lead through that?
um, you framed that nicely, and that is true. I mean, grow any growth is good growth, and which isn't true. I mean, conceptually, we've all been bitten. Not all revenue is equal. Some revenue is painful revenue, because you're either promising to do things that you shouldn't have promised, or you've you've overextended. We've all been there, and so there is a temptation to overextend. So the way I try to deal with that is where that brings the most amount of stress to our organization and to our employees is when we promise and we're not sort of upfront with the customer of what we can and can't do. And so we really try to take both door A and door B, but we try to be clear with the customer what it means and the trade-offs, and then just say we're going to do our best. But I find a lot that I get a lot more buy-in from our team when we are upfront about our limitations with the customer. And if the customer still chooses us, great, we want to do it. And we tell them sometimes, hey, look, you're a beta customer. We are figuring this out on the fly, but if you'll stick with us, we promise that we'll give you the very best we can. And to a lot of companies that buy from us, that's good enough. And that's really what I strive to do is just, hey, we are growing. We don't have this all figured out. I'm not gonna sell you a Temkin village. We're gonna build a real one, but you got to know there's going to be some growing pains.
Okay. So you've kind of had to negotiate some people would say a drop in standards in the standard of excellence, but you've done it in a way where you're doing it with transparency to help people
I I
manage. Is
don't
that
think it I don't think it's a drop in excellence. It's just the reality that anytime something's new for you, you can't do it as fast, or maybe you can always get to the end goal where you have the product you want to give a customer and you can be honest that that's good quality. It takes you longer to get there. If you think about the triangle of constraints, it's just, hey, we may hit some bumps and we may have to redo things, but we do at the end of the day deliver quality. What we're honest about is just know that we're figuring this out with you, as opposed to we have a turnkey operation. We've done it 17 times. This is going to be easy peasy. We don't try to make that promise.
okay? So what advantages do you see with that shift?
I don't know if there's any advantages. It's just how we try to limit the cognitive stress that sometimes comes by wanting to take on projects. Like there are customers where maybe we don't have the exact solution they want, but we really, really want that customer. I remember we did a performance review product like that for a customer. We really wanted the logo, and so and and that's where to do that, you need to be upfront and say, we really want your business, and it isn't exactly what we've done, but it's pretty adjacent, and we think we're going to get there. And then just accept the fact that they're going to get frustrated at you and call and say, hey, I thought you had this figured out. You just have to accept that. Train your team to be calm. Don't blame the customer. That, but yeah, because you want those deals. You do absolutely want those opportunities that are so close. They're not just perfectly in the bullseye, but they're like, they're out there, and we want that.
Okay, okay. Um, yeah. So I mean, it sounds like that's one decision process that's
Mhm.
changed a little bit
Yeah.
for you. What
Okay.
other decisions or relationship to those decisions has changed as you've shifted ownership?
Um, we have to be process oriented more than we were before. So when you're kind of a tech company, when you're consulting and then you're tech enabled services and then you're trying to complete your transformation to full SaaS, you can mask some problems by creating some custom projects or code. You can end up delivering really good stuff, but it's not repeatable. You haven't operationalized it. And now we have to operationalize it. We can't accept something that's just a one off because it's too painful. You have to learn from it and be able to operationalize that and systematize it for the next customer and the next customer. That's part of finishing the transformation into a full SaaS organization.
Okay. Okay. So is it so it's kind of scale pressure? Is that the right way to think of it? Like so if you're doing something that you can't repeat or it
If
doesn't scale, you're less
and it
likely to do it now.
That's right. It's scale pressure. Don't do things or don't figure out how to kind of make a well, I'll give you a story. If you remember back when Elon Musk had set up the tent um, and he was cranking out Teslas, I had a friend who actually got one of the cars, and lo and behold, the thing that held the battery in place was just a stick of wood. It's a perfectly acceptable way to hold a battery in place. It's not what you would expect, and it's not what you would find in a Tesla, but it was there, right? In the past you could do that, but eventually you can't. You have to have a standardized part that does the job. It was a nice looking piece of wood, but it was nonetheless a piece of wood holding because he was an early adopter, holding the battery in place.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Um, yeah. So what's one thing that surprised you after the deal? So is there anything that you didn't expect?
I think we had the couple challenges. There's just a culture challenge between the way companies operate in the European Union and us.
Uh-huh.
So we've had to navigate that. So we've had two. You just have the overall culture shock of being acquired and having someone else want you to do things a different way. But on top of that, we've had a language and cultural barrier that we've had to overcome. And that's been surprising is okay, stepping back and understanding how they operate. And even now this week, we thought one of our top sales guys in the Netherlands wanted us to do one thing. And it wasn't until like three other meetings afterwards, we're all like, oh, that's what he wanted. Yeah, that's a great idea. That'll work. But it took three meetings to get there. And that's kind of the price you have to pay to get Unity, right? Was like these three extra meetings, but like, oh, we get it now. It would be easier if we weren't trying to do that as well as
Mm,
scale. So,
yeah. Interesting. I lived in Europe for 3 years and actually worked a good bit in around the Netherlands and Belgium and the Dutch in particular have a reputation for directness
uh-huh,
and bluntness.
uh-huh.
Is that how has that landed? How have you adjusted to that aspect of their culture?
Absolutely a true aspect of their culture. They'll tell you that. Um, and you have to be willing to go and they expect you to come back to them with that same level of directness. And then when you do, they'll say something like, "Ah, now we're getting to what we need to get to." They'll make that comment. Um, uh, but what's hard about that still, even with their directness, is you just have all of this understanding of how our culture works that it just doesn't make sense to them. So you can be direct, but they still don't have a frame of reference to kind of understand what you're trying to say to them about, say, the way the market will receive a product or something like that.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, no, I've got many scars on my back from miscommunications, or I thought I was perfectly clear, and yeah,
Yeah.
and something gets lost in translation.
Right.
So
Right.
interesting. So you mentioned the premise
Hmm.
um, for the merger being
Hmm.
being able to put together kind of the two halves of
Huh?
a full employee engagement, kind of the environmental and then the intrinsic.
Intrinsic. Uh-huh.
Yeah. What, how's that theory playing out?
Great. We it's still something we're trying to shape the market and teach the market to understand. When we get a chance to tell it to a customer, we're winning. So our close rates are good. We just have to get people to realize it. We have to kind of educate them. And anytime you undertake um, a sales pitch where there's a certain amount of education involved, it's just a harder process. You know that. Like when you have to be what you're probably familiar with the challenger sale model, but we have to be really good challengers and take the time to say, hey, there's a different way to think about this. And there's a reason you plateaued, and you probably plateaued because you've done everything on this side of the equation, on this side of the balance beat. And now we need to start moving here. So it's great that we've reached maturity here, but we are just starting out over here and helping them catch that vision through a challenger sale model. It's working, but it takes time. And because it's not just like, oh, we have really real, it's not like in and out. You open an in and out and it seems like the line through the drive-in is going to be 3 blocks long. It's not that. You have to say, hey, we're different than other products that you might be familiar with, and this is why.
Okay. So still kind of educating your customers about
Mhm,
the
mhm,
value,
mhm.
and why.
They want it and they like the value, but you have to take the time to educate them about it. And then they're like, oh, I get it. And then they buy in. But
Hmm.
it does take some educating.
So, as you were evaluating this deal, did you have other options
Yeah,
that could have
we
unlocked
did.
the same possibility besides the PE venture you went with?
We could have. We had gone down the path of maybe trying to merge with some kind of companies that were similar in size to us and kind of saying, all right, all of us are going to throw our chips into the pot. You throw your chips in, and we're going to grow together. And we explored that. Um, for a variety of reasons, a lot of them are just kind of personal to Tracy, our founder. I think that those weren't going to work, but we did. We explored those. We thought about what if we sell the company to the employees? There are things like that that we because a lot of this was driven because he wanted an exit, and that's a normal and very uh, normal part of the business cycle. Uh, so those are a couple other areas that we looked at.
Okay. No, yeah, no, that makes sense. At some point, yeah, every founder's got to figure out, like, how do I move to the next phase?
Right.
No, that's interesting. So yeah, we're getting close to the end. I want to make sure
Huh?
we have time for this question. You know, at, if someone was listening to this who's sitting across from a growth opportunity right now, and
Mhm.
maybe it's a deal or partnership or conversation, and they're focused on the opportunity or what it unlocks, what would you want them to also be asking that maybe most people don't think about until it's too late?
How many of these deals have you done? So one of the challenges we faced is our private equity firm bought us and bought the company that kind of absorbed us about 3 months before they bought us. So that company was new, and I don't think had built any muscle memory or skill sets around integrating new companies. Now we're into our fourth and fifth, and we're all much better at it. But we were the first, and I think it took us some extra time, and we had some extra friction and delays because we were both trying to figure out, well, how do we do this? It's a little like taking you know, a brand new salesman and putting him under someone that's been doing it for 6 months. It's not the same as onboarding a salesperson and with someone who's been doing it for 10 years.
Oh, okay. So it was less about the deal, about the funding mechanism, and more about the fact that the portfolio company that was buying you was new at it.
Yeah. The other thing is every private equity company will tell you, oh, we have this great center of excellence. We're going to support you. We have all these decks and all these consultants. They're going to come help you. I wouldn't believe that. That's one I would discount. I would focus more on, okay, what am I expected to do and what tools can I get to on my own? but don't think that someone's going to come in and kind of illuminate the way and hold up the torch and light the path. That's not going to happen. So what you want to be clear about is, well, what tools can I get to on my own that you offer me, and how do I get those so that I can implement the plans that I want to make?
Okay. Any other due diligence from the standpoint of the person being bought that you would add to that?
Yeah, I think they hinted at it. I think we chose. I think we were careful to choose private equity to have the personality to match what we wanted. Um, just know that they all have a personality. You have to figure it out. That's how I would describe it. They'll say, "Oh, we have an approach, or we have a culture." I think of it as a personality, and can you be friends with that person? And that's and thinking of the private equity as a person, that's the question I would ask in diligence. That's how I would think about it in my mind, instead of like, because they'll all have a great story. They'll have a track record. We support you. We're all founder focused. They'll all tell you that, but you can pick up on more subtle cues that will tell you, is this kind of a person I can get along with? And certainly that's been true for us. So we've had friction and speed bumps, but I get along with who's leading the show.
Okay. And okay. So it's more like kind of negotiating a relationship or marriage, right? Choosing the partner is going to be the difference.
Years ago, I used to help dentists sell their practice, and I would tell them, please go to dinner and have marriage counseling before we even get to the deal points that we need to talk about. And I think it's the same regardless of the size of the transaction. It's still the same principle. Go to dinner and do marriage counseling before you do the deal.
That's great. Yeah, I can see how that would make a huge difference in the end. Excellent. I know what are you, 9 months in now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're starting to see rhythm, and all of the old remnants of our old past are dying away. The logos are starting to find their way into the break room. All the last places that you have to change, that's all happening. And it's been really great.
Well, thank you for giving us an insight into kind of this journey, right?
Yeah.
Of taking the leap, a new partnership and a new approach, and looking at what are some of the costs that come along with making a move like this to accelerate your growth. So
Yeah.
appreciate your honesty. These kinds of conversations sometimes don't hit the public airwaves, so um, I think more of them should. So really appreciate it. And for those of you listening, hey, there's a real signal here. I think that closing about, how to successfully look for a partner is really worth listening to. So
Thanks, John. Appreciate
thanks
it.
a lot, Matthew. Thanks for being here.
Okay.